a lot of questions of what is the president referring to? Which attacks did not get coverage? Give us examples. So late last night, the White House released a list of 78 terror attacks that it says were underreported. There's some low-profile cases on there, cases where there were no casualties. But also on that list, the San Bernardino shooting massacre, the Pulse nightclub attack in Orlando, the truck attack in Nice, France on that promenade, and then the Germany Christmas bazaar, that attack similarly with a truck. All of those got massive, extensive coverage in the media for days and then significant follow-up after that. And it's confusing as to why the president would first make this claim, but then when they were trying to back it up, include things on a list of underreported attacks that were very clearly reported.
Also, Karen Travers, there's a list now that's floating around the internet of attacks that didn't make the list, including, was it last week, in Canada, where that mosque was attacked by that gunman.
Yeah, this is the White House made a statement on this from the podium. Sean Spicer either was asked about this or he just on his own made a statement about this. But there's been a lot of buzz on social media that the president did not tweet about that. And, well, he doesn't tweet about everything, but he tweets about a lot of things. And why was that not on his radar? We've asked the White House.
And the White House hasn't commented.
They have not.
Oh, interestingly enough. After the, we're sort of in this no man's land of the White House says something and then it's sort of challenged and then they sort of go away. Also, there's a lot of stories, Karen Travers, about leaks and about the inner workings of this administration. Has the White House acknowledged that? Have they talked about any of these stories that have sort of come out the last couple of days?
Well, there's been a lot of pushback from the White House on some of the stories that have looked at, what the president is doing after hours and the isolation that the president might be facing, being in the White House. Yesterday, there was that big story in the New York Times about what the White House does, watching cable in his bathrobe, calling people on the phone and just kind of painting this picture of a person who's very isolated. And Sean Spicer was asked about this on Air Force One, and he pushed back by saying he doesn't think the president owns a bathrobe, and he definitely doesn't wear one. And he said there's just a lot of inaccuracies in the story, but he didn't get into detail. But certainly an aggressive pushback of the portrayal of chaos in the West Wing. Publicly, the White House wants to put forward a good face of we're all getting along and everybody's working together.
All right. Now, also, this Ninth Circuit Court today has a hearing. What is the White House saying about this?
So 6 p.m. Eastern time, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is going to hear arguments from both sides about the travel ban. Lawyers for the Justice Department say that the president has the authority to do this, and because of national security, it needs to be reinstated immediately. Lawyers for the states who have brought this suit against the White House say that not just the ban is unconstitutional, but resuming it, lifting that restraining order while it makes its way through the court system would unleash chaos. So that's what they're considering right now of whether or not, this seems inevitable that this could continue up to the Supreme Court, but as it's doing that, should the travel ban stay on hold or should it be reinstated?
I don't know if you're the right one to ask, Karen Travers, but you are so brilliant in your answers, I'll ask you anyway. When President Obama had an executive order keeping children here who were brought illegally, right? He sort of had an executive order, and that was ultimately overturned, but it took years to work its way through the courts.
Right.
This is working its way through the courts in lightning speed. What's the difference?
Yeah, it is going pretty quickly. And, some of it is because of the immediate impact of this. Like, this is a 90-day ban. So in some ways, the clock is ticking on it. But I think it's a good point you bring up about the previous president's executive action. There was that DAPA, as it was called, the parents of children who are citizens, but they are not. The president had that executive action that would lift the threat of deportation. There was a suit brought in Texas. Ultimately, that ends up in the Supreme Court. And that's where we saw that 4-4 tie. What happens in a 4-4 tie with the Supreme Court is nothing changes. Whatever the previous court ruled stays, which meant President Obama's executive actions were not allowed. So that's why this case today before the Ninth Circuit is so important, because the assumption is whatever happens here will not be overruled at the Supreme Court because of the breakdown of justices right now.
Yeah, assuming
so the losing side, if the losing side brings it to the Supreme Court, it would be very tough for them to get 5 votes to reverse that lower court,
right,
whichever side that is.
Right, reading the tea leaves of the Supreme Court, if they were to go and break on traditional conservative liberal arguments, it would be a 4-4 tie.
Exactly. Yeah. And the assumption, given the leaning of this Ninth Circuit, is that they are going to rule against the administration. It's more of a left-leaning court. They heard arguments over the weekend from the Department of Justice, and they rejected the argument about putting the ban back in place.
They're going to hear it at 6 p.m. tonight. But how long before they rule? Do we have any idea?
That's the big question. They were very quick over the weekend, but we've been told this is sort of a slower-moving court, but slower means a couple of days. But obviously this is something that has so much significance right now. There are people who are potentially literally waiting to get on planes from some of these countries who aren't sure if tomorrow they would not be able to. So all eyes are certainly on this court out of San Francisco, and we'll see how fast they come up with something.
Karen Travers, does Sean Spicer chew a lot of gum?
He does.
Okay. Right.
Yes. Lots. The profile of him last year in the Washington Post said it was 2.5 packs of cinnamon gum before noon. And here's the thing. He swallows it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That is too much information, Karen
How's
Travers.
your stomach feeling about that?
Have a good day, Karen. Thanks.
You too.
ABC News White House correspondent. Yes, that is more information than I wanted. 6:57 KTRS.